Okay, The Magic School Bus Show and Tells, a book about archaeology. Live from the Walkerville Civic Arena, it's the 10th Annual International Show and Tell Competition. Our class really digs having Mrs. Fizzle for a teacher. She makes every day fun, and today was no different. It all started at the International Show and Tell Competition. Our class was to show Arnold's rare rock collection. The only problem was Arnold was nowhere to be found. "Where is Arnold?" cried Phoebe, nervously looking at her watch. "The show's about to start." "I don't know what you're worried about," said Dorothy Ann. "I'm the one who has to go out there and tell them what we have. If Arnold doesn't get here soon, we'll be disqualified." We were beginning to panic when in raced Arnold. You guys are really going to thank me," he said, gasping for air. You didn't bring your rock collection?" "Where is your rock collection?" asked Dorothy Ann. "At home. I brought this instead," said Arnold. He pulled out his bag with a strange-looking hoop with a colorful net attached. "Is this great or what?" "What is it?" asked Tim. "I don't know," replied Arnold. I'm just a show part. Dorothy Ann is the tell part." Dorothy Ann looked at the hoop carefully. She turned it over and over in her hands. "I've spent the last 2 weeks digging up rock information. I don't have a clue what this thing is," she finally exclaimed. "What do we do now?" "We send Arnold home to get his rocks." There was no time for Arnold to go home and get his rocks, but we couldn't enter the competition with this hoop. We weren't even sure what it was. Suddenly, Miss Frizzle showed up. "You're just in time," Dorothy Ann told her. "Arnold brought this weird hoop for show and tell, but nobody knows what it is." "Well, as my nephew Conrad always says, when in doubt, figure it out," Miss Frizzle said. "The first thing we figured out is that Arnold found a hoop in a trunk that belonged to his great aunt, the famous archaeologist known as Arizona Joan. When I was little," said Arnold, "Aunt Joan used to tell me stories about what she did as an archaeologist, how she searched for things that were left behind by people a long time ago. She'd figure out how people lived based on the stuff she found." "So did she ever tell you what this was?" asked Wanda. "She never figured it out," replied Arnold, "but I do have this journal of her adventures. Maybe there's some clues in here," said Dorothy Ann, taking the journal. "When you think like an archaeologist, clues are news." Just then Miss Frizzle got that gleam in her eyes. "To the bus, class," she called. "Wait," cried Arnold. "If you're talking about a field trip, we can't go now. What about the show? We're about to go on." Dorothy Ann turned to Arnold. "Unless I can tell everybody what your Aunt Joan found, there's no show," she shouted. Miss Frizzle gave Arnold a two-way show and a television so he could hear and see us at all times. "Maybe my rock shouldn't have stayed home today." "So how did we figure out what this hoop is for if the people who used it weren't around to tell us?" Wanda asked Miss Frizzle as we boarded the bus. Miss Frizzle took the hoop from Wanda. "Archaeologists call something like this an artifact," she said. "So an artifact is anything made by people who lived a long time ago?" Tim asked. "Exactly, Tim," Miss Frizzle said. "But we couldn't figure out why someone made the hoop. Then Miss Frizzle told us that we'd have to guess the reason. Archaeologists put clues together to make a guess," Miss Frizzle explained. "They call that a hypothesis." "A hypothesis? I could have guessed that." We put together our clues. 1, the hoop was made of wood. 2, the hoop was strong. Ralphie guessed it was some sort of war thing, like a shield. But Tim thought it was a net. Okay, said Dorothy Ann. "So we have 2 good guesses. Now what?" But before she could finish, the Frizz turned the bus into a lab. "Welcome to the Suppositron, where all your guesses will be tested. An artifact is a key to the past." Now, if an archaeologist is going to try out an artifact, the first thing he does is make a copy of that artifact, Miss Frizzle said. She made a copy and gave the original artifact back to Liz to bring back to Arnold. Then we joined Miss Frizzle at the large computer. "It says here..." Now we know the hoop was made a long time ago," Miss Frizzle, "but what else do we know?" "It says here that it was found near Fort Walkerville," said Dorothy Ann, looking at Arizona Jones' journal. As the Frizz entered this information on the map, Walkerville appeared on the screen. "We know there had to be trees since it was made of wood," continued Ralphie, "and that some trees sprouted up on the screen. And there had to be people living there. Somebody must have made it," exclaimed Tim. Dorothy Ann looked in the journal again. "Arizona Joan writes about hunters and farmers," she said. "So maybe we can suppose that people there sometimes fought over territory," guessed Ralphie. Ralphie's guess was good, but he didn't know how to find out whether or not his guess was right. Then a smile crossed Miss Frizzle's face. We had a feeling something was about to happen, and we were right. One by one, we were tossed into the computer. "I think we're about to test our hypothesis." Woo-hoo! Suddenly we found ourselves in a place we had supposed. The suppositron had taken what we knew, added our guesses, and created a what-if world. As we looked around our what-if world, all we could see was a tribe of angry-looking people. We programmed them for a fight, Miss Frizzle reminded us. Better get your shield ready to test a hypothesis, she shouted to Ralphie. Running for cover, we watched an arrow flew right through the hoop webbing, twang, and into a tree. Thunk. So much for your hypothesis, we yelled back to Ralphie as we jumped back through the computer screen to safety. This is Ralphie's hypothesis come to life. We're doomed! Man, that was close, exclaimed Ralphie. We were just catching our breath when Arnold's voice came through Miss Frizzle's television. Attention, class. Come in, class. You guys know what time it is, he cried. We go on stage any minute now. We're working on it, replied Carlos, but we can tell you it's not a war thing. This hoop probably wasn't a war thing. It says here that Arizona Joan found remains of canoes near where she found a hoop, noted Wanda, her nose in a journal. I bet you it was catch fish. And then Tim picked up the hoop. Look at the webbing, he said. It makes it perfect for grabbing and scooping things. I guess it was a net. So now I have to say a fish net. Miss Frizzle's class entered the guests into the suppositron. Come on, class, let's make a splash, she said. Then we dove into the screen. We were a little worried, but we followed her. Splash, splash, splash. In my old school, we always did what the teacher asked. I hypothesized that it's a fish net. Paddling downstream, we noticed that the water was full of fish, but every time Tim tried to catch a fish with a hoop, they would just slip through the net or swim around it. Too bad you can't catch one, Dorothy Ann said. Just then Miss Frizzle pointed out that we were heading straight for the rapids. I think I'm going to be sick. Help! Oh, look, class, rapids! Meanwhile, back at show and tell competition, Arnold turned television back to shooting down the rapids. I can't believe this is happening. I go on any minute, he cried, but Liz wasn't worried. She was busy playing, throwing cheesy wheezies through the rolling hoop. Quit playing. This is serious business. We made it through the rapids safely, but we still hadn't figured out what the hoop was. Then Keisha picked up the hoop. When you think about it, she says, why would they give this hoop all these beautiful colors if they were just going to stick it in water? So based on that observation, Keisha, what would you say it is? Miss Frizzle asked. A hat, she answered. Dorothy Ann agreed that the hoop could have been a hat. It says in a journal that Joan found shells and beads that people used to decorate their clothing. Well, it definitely wasn't a fishing net. So we guessed that the hat was worn as part of a dance celebration and put our hypothesis to the test. We had a dancer's drums at nighttime to the suppositron. Before we knew it, we were dancing at a harvest celebration. Don't you just love to dance? Said Keisha. She struggled to keep the hat on. Whoops! Anybody have some tape? Let's celebrate! It looks like my hypothesis is history. The more Keisha danced, the more the hoop slipped off her head. There's no way to keep this hat on, she cried. No bands, no ties, no straps. And there are no marks on the rim to show where they could have been, noticed Phoebe. I looked as if Keisha's hypothesis was wrong. We were starting to think we'd never figure out, but Miss Frizzle wasn't worried. I bet my bottom buttons, there are more hypotheses where this one came from, she said. Back at the bus, we called Arnold through the television. Come in, Arnold, we said, Dorothy Ann. What's taking? Was there anything else in the bag besides the hoop? We watched on the screen as Arnold pulled stuff out of the bag. Some baby pitchers, booties, a pacifier, and suddenly some arrows. The arrow tips looked dull and seemed to be decorated just like the hoop. We guessed that the arrows and the hoop went together, but how, we wondered. Suddenly Dorothy Ann realized that the arrows would probably fit through the holes in the hoop net. I need one of those arrows, she exclaimed, and with that she raced to the auditorium, grabbed an arrow from Arnold, and zoomed back to the lab. Think, theorize, guesstimate, suppose. I have a hypothesis to test. You're leaving me alone again? Arnold called after Dorothy Ann. Suddenly he heard our school being announced. Join me in welcoming the contestants of Walker Elementary School. Arnold felt sick. Hi, he said into the microphone. This is an artifact, something from long ago. And from objects like this, we can figure out how people lived their lives. If you know how to read clues, he continued. Back at the lab, the Frizz made copies of the arrows while Dorothy Ann added the information to the suppositron. Before we knew it, we were following Dorothy Ann through the screen into hoops and arrow competition. What's going on, we asked. Don't you get it? Responded Dorothy Ann. What's round, different colors, and goes into something pointy, she asked. A dartboard, exclaimed Wanda. So maybe your artifact was a game, suggested Phoebe, and maybe you have to get the arrows through the holes. That sounded good to us. Even long ago, people needed to have fun. Then we noticed that the rim of the hoop was worn down. We guessed that the hoop didn't stay still like a dartboard. Instead, maybe the hoop was rolled on the ground while other people tried to throw arrows through it. Let's play hoops and arrows. We were having so much fun playing hoops and arrows that we forgot about poor Arnold. But Arnold was busy talking to the audience. He was telling them that the hoop might be a shield. Oh, cried the audience. Well, actually, said Arnold, lifting the hoop to his face, it would kind of be useless because arrows would go right through the holes. Sighed the audience. Arnold continued. He knew he had to keep the audience's attention. Pretend you're paddling down a river, trying to catch a fish. You sweep the water, he said, pretending to be a fish. Then realized you better get a paddle. Arnold's heart was pounding. Imagine you're at a ceremony, he told the audience. The fire roars, the drummers pound, the dancers sway, and then what? Why did it break? Cried the audience, and then that's it. You wonder why you bought this hat, then it's all done. Because there's no way to stay on your head when you dance, sighed Arnold as the hoop rolled off the stage. But as he chased the rolling hoop, he suddenly figured it out. Ladies and gentlemen, Arnold announced, believe it or not, this artifact is something kids know really well. It's a game. The object of the game was probably to get arrows through the rolling hoop. You see, Arnold told the audience, this is only a hypothesis, a good guess, but the things left behind by the people who lived long ago, like this hoop, give us clues about how they lived. It's up to archaeologists like us to fit the clues together. The audience clapped loudly for Arnold and stood on their feet. We ran into the auditorium just as Arnold was being handed the top prize. He bowed and said, this award doesn't belong to me alone, it belongs to my classmates at Walker Elementary. With best performance by a team who didn't look like they knew what they were doing, but somehow came through it, the very last second award. How did he figure this out without us? The end. That it?
Yeah. No. That's it.